We all have certain genres of television and film that we really enjoy. In television, most of what you see are sitcoms, crime shows, talk shows, hospital shows, sports, reality, children's, which I'm going to include cartoons, game shows, religious, news magazines, sci-fi, westerns, and other types of drama. Reality TV we call the voyeurism for the digital age. We get to look into the lives of real people, although I often question how real is it. Television started off with quiz shows, which I already shared, and the format kind of went dormant until Regis Philbin came out with the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It was on 4 days a week, but it suffered burnout. So most of the game shows we see today are the two that are still the most popular. We have Jeopardy and we have Wheel of Fortune. Sitcoms are the perennial favorites. The subset is domestic comedy, which is a generic family comedy identified by character-based humor, usually set within the home. Seminal examples included the most popular show in the 1950s, which was Leave It to Beaver. And we also had the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Father Knows Best, which is in the picture up here. Today we have Modern Family, just a bit different, but still representative of the culture of today. Drama started with live broadcasts from theaters. Then we turned to westerns, cop shows, hospital shows, and soap operas. All right, this video no longer plays, but it was made by the chairman of the FCC at the time. His name was Newt Minow. And he made a speech and he said television was a vast wasteland. Now this was in 1961. And I have to ask you, has the content really changed on television? Is it really all just for entertainment, or is there anything that really teaches us anything anymore? They're called reality shows, but are they really real? Look at the Housewives of Orange County, the Housewives of Hollywood, Big Brother, The Bachelor. Are they a reality? No, they're scripted. When the camera shows up, the actors are ready, and lots of editing is needed to frame what's best for the show and the powers that be. This was a quote from the Real Housewives of Orange County. They claim to be representative of Orange County, but are they? They've all had cosmetic surgery, all have husbands who are non-assertive in the show. They're kind of wimpy. The children, for the most part, are spoiled and act atrocious. The show glorifies consumerism. She who has the most surgery gets the richest man. Yes, that's Lori. And glorifies spending. It's all about wealth. I didn't say that, someone else did, and it's unattributed. I'm not sure where it came from. Game shows like Wheel of Fortune are by chance only. Jeopardy, you need a little bit of a brain there to play that game and do well. Think about some of the other shows that are on that you might consider worthless. Maybe you use those for what's called withdrawal, which you'll learn about, or you've already learned about, in media theory and the uses and gratifications. We have a certain time of day and shows are grouped into one of those blocks, and you'll see those there. So for example, we have daytime talk shows, we have daytime soap operas, and we have late night TV. I want to talk a little bit about safe harbor and what that means. And that was set up in the fall of 1975 when the FCC decided there was perhaps some things that were coming up on television that were inappropriate for children. So they developed what was called the Family Viewing Hour. And the networks all agreed to keep television shows, what they called family applicable, during the first hour of prime time, which was 8 to 9. So today, the safe harbor is anything that's on after 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning is kind of anything goes. Now, mind you, this is broadcast television. This is not what you see streaming or even on cable. So the law says, or the FCC says, that networks can't show anything that is considered indecent during the daytime or during prime time. What is television's portrayal of family? I discussed this a little bit already, where today we have Modern Family, and in early television we had The Father Knows Best. Now, if you break this down, I could talk about this for hours, because break it down by the role of the person. We have children, teenagers, adults, and I'm going to say mother and father. And we also could have aunts and uncles. We could also have the people that work in the home, butlers, maids, housekeepers, things like that. In the 1950s, the father was the know-it-all, the be-it-all. The mother stayed home. She looked wonderful. Look how beautiful those women look in that picture. They have all their makeup on and everything like that. No sweats, no hair in a ponytail. Father knows best. In the 1960s, fathers were portrayed as a little more opinionated. And in the 70s, we had Archie Bunker, who was a complete bigot. In the 1980s, we brought in a little bit of differentiation and representation of different races. We had the Cosby Show. In the 90s, we had this seriously just father that was just so dumb we would just laugh at. We had Al Bundy, we had Homer Simpson. So I want to say Dad went from super dad to super dumb. Mom moved from the kitchen to the boardroom. Today's mother and father are shown in a much more realistic light. Or are they? We see happy couples and families, but we also see what we read about in the news. Single parents who struggle to make it work, to issues such as domestic violence. Before I really get into this next slide, I'd like to say first that I would hope that you'll take the time and look for this video on YouTube and watch it, because it really gives some good examples about what I'm going to share with you here. I have to tell you that my mother, who at the time was about 25 years old, did watch this debate on television and did feel that John F. Kennedy won this debate. Now, it probably didn't hurt that she also thought he was probably one of the most handsome men in the United States at the time, which was a very common feeling of women during that time period. But the statistics show that those who watched the debate on television did feel that Kennedy won this debate, whereas those who listened to it on the radio felt Nixon won. So let me explain perhaps why. On September 26, 1960, for the first time in U.S. history, a debate between major party presidential candidates was broadcast on live television. These presidential hopefuls were John F. Kennedy, a Democratic senator from Massachusetts, and Richard Nixon, the Vice President of the United States. The two met in a Chicago studio to discuss U.S. domestic matters. For those who watched the debate, the majority felt Kennedy emerged the apparent winner from this first of 4 televised debates, partly owing to his greater ease before the camera than Nixon. Kennedy was handsome, had his hair and makeup done by a professional, and his father paid for him to have a speechwriter and a vocal coach, so he physically appeared calm and confident. He also looked directly into the camera. Viewers said they felt a connection with him because it was as if he was speaking directly to them. On the other hand, unlike Kennedy, Nixon seemed nervous and was visually twitchy and sweating due to the heat of the studio lights. Nixon had refused makeup for the first debate. Subsequently, his facial stubble showed prominently on the black and white television screens at the time. His light gray suit faded into the backdrop of the set and seemed to match his skin tone. Nixon was also battling a staph infection due to hitting his knee, requiring him to be hospitalized. Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley in an interview said, "My God, they've embalmed him before he's even died." Nixon fared better in the second and third debates, and on October 21st, the candidates met to discuss foreign affairs in their fourth and final debate. Less than 3 weeks later, on November 8th, Kennedy won 49.7% of the popular vote in one of the closest presidential elections in U.S. history, surpassing by a fraction the 49.6% received by his Republican opponent. I'm going to talk here about some of television's most known effects on social issues. In the 1960s, we had what I just showed you, the Kennedy-Nixon debate. And we also had and unfortunately, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, that too was also on live television. Most of the United States tuned in on television to watch his funeral. Vietnam, the war in Vietnam in the 70s and the 60s was one of the events that was rarely shown on television. We didn't see very much about it. Civil rights became an issue in the 60s, and a lot of that was the news was shown on television. It was black and white, but it gave people a visual, of what was happening at the time. 1968, on the television show Star Trek, people saw the first interracial kiss. The 1970s to 2000, there was significant social issues that were addressed for the first time on television. In 1970, the television show The Odd Couple showed two divorced men who rented an apartment together. They were complete opposites. It was a sitcom, it was a comedy, but it was the first time that divorce was really talked about on television. In 1971, we had Archie Bunker's All in the Family. They talked about racial issues, homosexuality, and even rape. 1977 was the miniseries Roots. It became the most highly watched miniseries, and it educated Americans about slavery. 1991, we saw the first woman-to-woman kiss on the television show L.A. Law. In 1992, there was a comedic bit in the show Seinfeld that addressed masturbation. They never really came out and talked about it, but we knew that's what they were referring to. In 2000, South Park came on, and there was quite a bit of vulgarity in that and a lot of controversy of why this didn't play into the safe harbor rules. Today we have reality television. Probably, to me, the most negative effect of it is people do think it's real, when in fact a lot of it is scripted. I want you to take a moment now and think about what television shows today tackle social issues, whether it's a factual format like a documentary, or it's a fictional format like a drama or a sitcom. And how have these shows or this show made a change? Going back to media effects, one of my favorite topics, television was known for three, and these three theories are tied to consumption of television. These are in addition to what you already learned about the cultivation theory and desensitization. In talking about the mythologizing effect, appreciate how emotionally powerful this effect is. Think of how you would react to your favorite television personality coming to visit your home. You'd feel that personage's presence is constituting an event of momentous proportions, a visitation from an otherworldly being. Media personages are infused with this defied quality by virtue of the fact they are seen as inside the mythical space of the television. This is why meeting actors, musical stars, etc. causes great enthusiasm and excitement in many people. Media celebrities are seen the contemporary equivalents of the graven images of the Bible. The next is the history fabrication effect. This is when television literally fabricates history by inducing the impression in viewers that some ordinary event, like an election campaign, an actor's love affair, a fashion trend, something like that, is a momentous happening. People make up their minds about the guilt or innocence of others just by watching TV news and interviews. They see certain behaviors as laudable or the opposite damnable by tuning into talk shows or docudramas. In a phrase, the events that receive airtime are felt to be more significant and historically meaningful to society than those who don't. Look at sports events like the World Series, the Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup playoffs. Those are transformed on television into Herculean struggles of mythic heroes. Events such as the John F. Kennedy assassination, the Vietnam War, Watergate hearings, the Rodney King beating, O.J. Simpson trial, Bill Clinton's sex scandal, and other things like that are transformed into portentous and prophetic historical events. In short, television has become the maker of history and its documenter at the same time. The final one is the cognitive compression effect, whereas television has gotten us so used to absorbing large doses of information that it's been cut up, packaged, and digested beforehand. This has fostered a psychological dependency on information that has a visual stimulation. This is the reason why television is vastly more popular than reading. After work or school in the evenings, who wants to sit down and read a book? That entails mental effort and causes a slowdown in information processing. TV viewing, on the other hand, it's very easy. because the images do the thinking for us. TV ratings and shares are one thing that's very important to marketers. Are we making a profit on our ads? And how are we going to sell those? What are we going to base those on? So we measure our audiences to determine the advertising rates. Now, this is generally done by the AC Nielsen company. They're the ones that are the big name in media research. There used to be 3 ways to do this, and I want to stop here and add that this has become very difficult now with streaming television and streaming media to keep track of this. Back in the day, they used 3 different methods. First, homes were chosen to do this, and there was no paid compensation. You got a diary where you actually wrote down what your family watched. You had a people meter where you walked over to your television and pushed a button that was connected to your television. And they were given out to 5,000 random households to get a good random sampling. Then they had set tuning meters, which would actually record what you watched all day long. Now, you have 2 terms that you need to know: ratings and shares. Ratings measure viewers to the entire population. So, for example, if you had 1,000 viewers in a city of 10,000, that's a 10% rating. On the other hand, shares measure who's actually watching. So if you have 1,000 viewers and there's 2,000 TV sets on, that's 50% share. Television does have a global market, and one of the things that I find extremely interesting is a television show that was on decades ago is still the most popular, best-selling, internationally syndicated show, Baywatch. It's known as TV's most watched TV show in the world. It has a weekly audience of 1.1 billion, or at least it did several years ago, and it was broadcast in 44 languages to 148 countries. But is it really a true representation of what's American? I don't look around and see most everybody looks like this. Prior to that, The Cosby Show was the most popular TV show in some parts of the world, specifically Canada and Australia, because there was finally a television show that had a positive portrayal of African Americans. Now that we have streaming TV, when those first became popular, here's the top shows internationally: The Wire, Mad Men, Game of Thrones, and Breaking Bad. The last 2 slides will talk about technology and innovation trends in the television industry. Digital television converts television program as a series of ones and zeros, which makes the picture sharper than an analog, which converts one form of energy to another to transport the content. Analog TV changes the actions of actors into electrical impulses that can be carried by the energy waves of the electromagnetic spectrum. You'll see then we moved into digital television and high def and interactive in 3D, which we really don't see too much of anymore. I did some research and found that the major trends to look out for in 2023 are even larger screens, 8K resolution, and smart features. Now, this article I read did say that you're not going to see that in every home, but that's where the trend is going. One thing I want to kind of back up and talk about is the telecommunication. One of the things that I want to back up and talk about is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. This was the first major overhaul of telecommunications law in about 60 years. The goal of this law was to let anyone enter any communications business, to let any communications business compete in any market against any other. I know it sounds like a mouthful. The quote that was stated as the purpose of this was actually here, and you can read that on this slide. And last, content. Market research that I looked up shows here's some of the trends for television in 2023. People want more accurate, local, and up-to-the-minute updates. They want quality and timeliness of information, and this is to keep up with the demand for 24/7 news. Now, these first 2 apply mostly to news consumption by television. Obviously, we have more of a move into the OTT or the over-the-top delivery systems. Apple TV, Roku, Fire Stick, those kind of things. And it also gives a larger audience for local broadcast TV stations. We also have the streaming media, of course, and my favorites are probably Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Hulu. We've recently gotten Paramount Plus and Apple Plus. So as the services continue to be offered, we'll probably continue to change those. We are one of those households that still have cable television too. So we're kind of in the middle of both. I don't know about you. It'd be interesting to know how many of you no longer have a cable connection other than maybe for your internet, but not for your television. This is the end of the lecture. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and contact me.